Through champagne toasts and countdown cheers, Michael Chen watches his pregnant wife sign divorce papers at her family's New Year's Eve party. His hand trembling as he holds their 3-year-old son while the entire Lancaster family erupts in celebration around him. His mother-in-law, Victoria Lancaster, raises a crystal flute in mock triumph as Michael's wife, Sarah, stands beside her new fiancé, both of them smiling at the man they're destroying. But none of them see the notification lighting up Michael's phone in his pocket. None of them recognize the sender's name. Mom. None of them know that the broken man standing there in tears is Michael Chen, the only son of Linda Chen, the tech billionaire whose innovations power half the devices in this city. Before we continue into this incredible story, we wish you a prosperous 2026. May every line fall perfectly into place for you and all your endeavors throughout 2026. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. To stories like this touch your heart, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. You're about to hear a story that will stay with you long after it ends, and tomorrow I have something truly special waiting for you. Michael's vision blurs as Sarah signs page after page, her movements sharp and decisive, so different from the gentle woman he thought he'd married. Their son Danny clings to Michael's neck, confused by the noise and his father's tears. While Sarah's family celebrates like Michael is a disease they've finally cured. His 7 months pregnant wife's belly is visible beneath her designer dress, but no one in the Lancaster family acknowledges that the baby she's carrying is Michael's second child. They watch him suffer in silence, their New Year's party laughter echoing off walls decorated with gold and silver, paid for by investments Michael secretly provided. Living in a penthouse whose mortgage was quietly cleared by money they never bothered to trace. Finally, Victoria Lancaster announces to the room, her voice dripping with satisfaction as Sarah signs the final page. My daughter is finally free from the pathetic substitute teacher who trapped her with a pregnancy. She's moving on to someone worthy of the Lancaster name. But the man they call pathetic has a mother whose net worth could buy their entire social circle 100 times over. The man they call a gold digger owns the investment firm that holds the notes on half their properties. And the tears streaming down Michael's face aren't tears of defeat. Sarah steps closer, her perfume expensive and unfamiliar as she reaches for Danny. I'll take him now, she says, her voice cold and businesslike. Marcus and I need to discuss custody arrangements. You can see him on weekends maybe? Marcus, her colleague turned fiancé, laughs from across the room, his hand possessively on Sarah's lower back. The room erupts in fresh laughter, Sarah's brother raising his glass. To upgrades, he shouts, and the Lancaster family drinks to Michael's replacement like he's already forgotten. Michael's arms tighten protectively around Danny, who's fallen asleep against his shoulder, exhausted from the late hour and the chaos. He thinks about the day he met Sarah 5 years ago at a university lecture where he'd been guest speaking about educational reform, using his mother's maiden name, Chen, desperate to escape the suffocating world of tech galas and women who only saw his mother's empire. Sarah had been different that night, or so he believed. She talked about her dreams of opening her own art gallery, about creating spaces where emerging artists could flourish without commercial pressure. She'd held his hand and called him brilliant without once asking about his family or his bank account. He'd fallen in love with her passion, with the way her eyes lit up when she talked about art. He'd believed she loved him for who he was, not what he had. He'd been wrong. The marriage started crumbling a year in when Sarah's gallery failed. Michael had offered to help, but she'd refused initially. Then, when he finally convinced her to accept assistance, she'd started asking questions. Why did he have access to so much money if he was just a substitute teacher? Why were his investments always so successful? Why did he deflect every question about his family? Michael had been honest then, sitting her down and explaining everything. His mother's company, the wealth he'd walked away from to find authentic connection, his fear that people only wanted him for money. Sarah had listened, had held him, had promised she loved him regardless. But Victoria Lancaster had been listening too, having installed cameras in their apartment under the guise of security for her daughter. The Lancaster family had decided Michael was a liar hiding wealth, and instead of rejecting him, they'd made it their mission to extract every dollar they could before discarding him. The failed gallery had been just the beginning. Sarah's business investments, that always needed more capital. Her mother's medical emergencies, that required immediate payment. Her brother's startup opportunities, that evaporated the moment Michael's money cleared. And then Sarah got pregnant with Danny, and Michael had been so happy, so convinced that fatherhood would bring them closer. Instead, Sarah had grown colder, more distant, more interested in her phone and her colleague Marcus than in her husband or son. The second pregnancy had been a surprise, One Sarah initially wanted to terminate until Michael begged her to reconsider, promised he'd be the primary caregiver, anything to save his child's life. She'd agreed, but only because Victoria had a better plan. Wait until Michael was attached to both children, then divorce him, take everything in the settlement, and move on to Marcus, whose family's old money and social connections were what Sarah had really wanted all along. Michael straightens slowly, his back aching from standing so long while holding Danny. He shifts his sleeping son's weight carefully, protectively. Sarah holds out the signed divorce papers with manicured nails that Michael paid for, her engagement ring from Marcus already on her finger while her wedding ring from Michael sits in a dish by the door like discarded trash. "I hope he makes you happy," Michael whispers, his voice so broken that for a second, just a flicker of a second, something crosses Sarah's face. Regret maybe, or recognition of what she's destroying. But Marcus whispers something in her ear and whatever moment existed vanishes. Victoria Lancaster steps forward, blocking Michael's path to the door. "Before you go," she says, her smile sharp as diamonds, "I want you to know that we've already filed for full custody of both children. Good luck fighting the Lancaster family lawyers with your substitute teacher salary. You'll see your kids when we decide you can see them, if ever." The words hit Michael like physical blows, each one designed to destroy whatever hope he has left. Victoria's friends nod in agreement, their faces twisted with satisfaction at watching Michael crumble. Michael looks at Victoria, really looks at her, and something inside him shifts. The pain doesn't disappear, but it transforms into something colder, something harder. "Thank you," Michael says quietly, and the words confuse Victoria enough that she steps back. "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. All of you." Michael's eyes sweep the room, landing on each celebrating face, each contemptuous smile, memorizing them. Sarah's brother, her sister, her aunt who'd sneered at Michael's thrift store clothes, her father who'd asked point-blank how much Michael was really worth, trying to assess the final extraction potential. Michael walks toward the door, Danny secure in his arms, his phone buzzing insistently in his pocket. Mom calling for the 20th time tonight. He'd limited his contact with Linda Chen for 3 years, too ashamed to admit that he'd chosen love over her warnings, too proud to confess that Sarah's family was systematically draining the trust fund he'd been living off. Linda Chen had investigated Sarah Lancaster the moment Michael brought her home, and she delivered the truth with the bluntness of a woman who'd built a tech empire by seeing through corporate espionage and hostile takeovers. "She's marrying you for what she thinks you're hiding," his mother had said. "The moment she confirms you have money, she'll take everything and leave. And if you give her children, she'll use them as leverage." Michael had called his mother controlling and limited contact, believing Sarah's tears and promises instead. He'd been a fool. Michael pushes through the Lancaster family's penthouse doors and steps into the hallway, the sounds of celebration muffled by expensive soundproofing. He can hear fireworks outside, the city celebrating a new year, a new beginning. Danny stirs against his shoulder, mumbling sleepily about wanting his mommy, breaking Michael's heart all over again. His hands shake as he presses the elevator button, and when Danny starts to cry, confused and sensing his father's distress, Michael has to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. "It's okay, buddy," he whispers, but his voice cracks. "Daddy's here. Daddy's always here." He thinks about Sarah demanding he sign a prenup that gave her everything, claiming it was about trust. He thinks about the paternity test she'd insisted on when she got pregnant with Danny, laughing with her mother about making sure Michael couldn't trap her. He thinks about Marcus moving into their lives 6 months ago, about Sarah's sudden girls' trips, and late nights at the office. The betrayal burns through him, hot and consuming, until he can barely breathe through the pain. Michael pulls his phone from his pocket with one hand, balancing Danny with the other. 23 missed calls from Mom, 15 text messages. The most recent one reads simply, "Michael, I'm at the building. Please let me help." He stares at those words, at the concern from the woman he'd pushed away because he'd been too proud to admit she'd been right about everything. His thumb hovers over her name, but shame stops him. What does he even say? That he'd thrown away his family's support for a woman who just signed away their marriage at a party? That his children are about to be taken from him by lawyers he can't afford to fight? But Danny is crying harder now, calling for his mommy, and Michael thinks about what happens if he doesn't call. What happens if he tries to handle this alone, broken and divorced and about to lose his children? What kind of father does that make him? He presses call before he can talk herself out of it, and his mother answers before the first ring finishes. "Michael." Her voice cracks on his name and the sound breaks something inside his chest. "Michael, where are you? Are you safe? Is Danny with you?" "Mom." Michael whispers, and then he can't say anything else because sobs take over. 3 years of pain and loneliness and betrayal pouring out of him in the Lancaster building hallway. He cries for the man who thought he could have a normal life, for the father who'd believed love could exist without money complicating everything, for the parent who has to tell his mother he'd failed at the one thing he'd been so sure he could do on his own. "I'm in the lobby," Linda Chin says, her voice steady and sure, the voice of a woman who's solved bigger problems than this, who's built a tech empire from nothing. "Come down, sweetheart. Bring Danny. We'll fix this, Michael. Whatever happened, we'll fix it." Michael looks back at the penthouse door, at the sounds of celebration still audible, at the family that destroyed him without ever knowing they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. He thinks about Victoria's custody threat, about Sarah's cold dismissal, about Marcus's triumphant smile. He thinks about the signed divorce papers and the wedding ring sitting in a dish like garbage, and the 3 years he'd spent loving people who'd been planning his destruction the entire time. "I'm coming down now," Michael says finally, his voice steadier now, the tears slowing. "They threw a party to celebrate, Mom. They made me sign while Danny was crying. And they're going to try to take both kids. They said I'll never see them again." He hears his mother's sharp intake of breath, the dangerous silence that follows. Linda Chin didn't become one of the world's most powerful tech moguls by letting people hurt her family without consequences, and Michael can practically hear her mobilizing resources through the phone. "Come down," his mother says, her voice cold as steel. "I'm here. And Michael?" They have no idea what's coming. The line goes dead, and Michael shifts Danny in his arms, his son's tears finally stopping as he falls back into exhausted sleep. Inside the penthouse, the Lancaster family celebrates their victory, completely unaware that the man they just destroyed has made one phone call that will end everything they have. But Michael doesn't feel victorious. He just feels tired and sad and so completely done with trying to be someone he's not. He steps into the elevator and rides down, watching the floor numbers decrease, taking him away from his old life and toward whatever comes next. Behind him, the Lancaster family faces a New Year's morning that will arrive with legal documents and financial revelations and the complete destruction of everything they thought they had. But Michael doesn't look back anymore. He's done looking back. He's looking down at his son's sleeping face, holding tight to the child they think they can take from him, walking toward his mother who never stopped fighting for him, even when he pushed her away. The divorce papers are signed. The marriage is over. But Michael Chen's story is just beginning. And the people who tried to destroy him are about to learn what happens when you underestimate a man whose mother built an empire on never backing down from a fight. The elevator opens to the lobby, and Michael sees her immediately. Linda Chin, standing by the glass doors in a coat that costs more than the Lancaster family's monthly expenses, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back in the severe bun she wears when she means business. Behind her stand 4 people. 2 attorneys Michael recognizes from news coverage, a woman who must be child services or family law, and a security specialist whose presence means his mother isn't taking chances. Linda's face crumples when she sees Michael, sees his red eyes and tear-stained face, sees the way he's holding Danny like the child might disappear if he loosens his grip even slightly. She crosses the lobby in seconds, her heels clicking against marble with the rhythm of inevitability. "Let me see you," she says softly, her hands gentle as she touches Michael's face, tilting it toward the light. Her jaw tightens when she sees the exhaustion carved into his features, the defeat in his shoulders, the way he's trembling. "I should have come sooner. I should have dragged you home a year ago instead of respecting your boundaries." Michael shakes his head, fresh tears spilling over. "You were right about her, about all of it. I was so stupid, Mom. I thought I could have something real, something that wasn't about money or power or business deals. I thought she loved me." His voice breaks on the last word, and Linda pulls him into her arms carefully, mindful of Danny sleeping between them, her hand cradling the back of Michael's head like he's still her little boy who came home crying from school instead of a grown man whose heart just got shattered by people too blind to see what they had. "You weren't stupid," Linda says firmly, her voice carrying the authority of a woman who's negotiated with world leaders and Fortune 500 CEOs. "You were hopeful. You wanted to believe in goodness. That's not stupidity, Michael. That's courage they don't deserve." She pulls back to look at him, her eyes hard as diamonds now, the softness reserved for her son replaced by something calculating and cold. "But hope doesn't mean you let people destroy you. And courage doesn't mean you suffer in silence when you have the power to make them understand exactly what they've done." Upstairs, someone must have noticed Michael never came back. Sarah appears in the lobby, stepping out of the elevator with Marcus and Victoria flanking her like bodyguards. Her earlier confidence falters as she takes in the scene, Michael, his mother, the legal team, the security specialist, all of it screaming money and power on a level she clearly didn't expect. "Michael," Sarah calls out, her voice uncertain now. "What's going on? Who are these people? And why haven't you brought Danny back up?" Linda doesn't answer Sarah. Instead, she turns to the woman beside her, who steps forward with a tablet and an expression of professional disgust. "Mrs. Lancaster," the woman says crisply, "I'm Jennifer Martinez, senior partner at Chen Family Legal. I've been retained to handle Mr. Chen's divorce proceedings and custody matters." Victoria pushes forward, her champagne confidence making her bold in ways she's about to regret. "There are no custody matters to handle," she snaps. "We're filing for full custody of both children, and Michael doesn't have the resources to fight us. So you can take your little intimidation tactics and—" "Both children?" Linda interrupts, her voice dangerously quiet. "You mean my grandson Danny and my unborn granddaughter that your daughter is currently carrying? The children you plan to remove from their father's life completely?" Victoria stops short, her face paling slightly. "We have every right to protect those children from a father who can't provide for them properly. Michael works as a substitute teacher. He lives in a one-bedroom apartment. He has no stable income, no assets, no assets." Linda's smile could freeze oceans. "That's interesting. Jennifer, what do our records show about Michael's financial situation?" The attorney doesn't even need to consult her tablet. "Michael Chen is the beneficiary of the Chen Family Trust, currently valued at $847 million. He receives a monthly distribution of $250,000, which he's been living off while choosing to work in education. He also owns, through the trust, a portfolio of properties including the building we're currently standing in." The words land like grenades. Michael watches Sarah's face transform from confusion to shock to dawning horror as she realizes what she's just thrown away. Marcus's hand drops from her back, and he takes an actual step away from her, calculating his own exposure to this disaster. "No," Sarah whispers, but she's looking at Michael now, really looking at him for the first time in months, and she's seeing things she missed. The quality of his watch that she thought was a knockoff. The way he carries himself despite his grief. The education in his vocabulary that she dismissed as him trying to sound smart. "Michael, is this true?" Sarah's voice cracks. "Are you really? Your mother is Linda Chen? The Linda Chen who founded Chen Technologies?" Michael doesn't answer her. He doesn't owe her answers anymore. Instead, he watches his mother work, watches her dismantle the Lancaster family with the precision of a master strategist and the ruthlessness of a woman protecting her child. "Jennifer," Linda continues, her voice crisp, "please inform Mrs. Lancaster and her family of the additional complications to their situation." The attorney steps forward, her voice professional but carrying an edge of satisfaction. "Sarah Lancaster, you are currently employed as a curator at the Meridian Gallery, a position that exists solely because Chen Investments owns 60% of the gallery and specifically requested your hiring 3 years ago at Mr. Chen's request, believing it would make you happy. That employment is terminated effective immediately." Sarah's face goes white. "Victoria Lancaster, you serve on the board of Metropolitan Children's Foundation, a position funded by annual donations from Chen Family Charitable Trust. Those donations cease immediately, and your board seat has been terminated. Your husband, Robert Lancaster, owns Lancaster Financial Advisory, a firm that manages portfolios worth $40 million, including $30 million from Chen family entities and associates. Those accounts are being withdrawn, and the firm will likely declare bankruptcy within 90 days. Victoria sways on her feet, her face gray now. "You can't do this. You can't destroy people's lives because your son got divorced. This is insane." But her voice has no power anymore, just desperate fear as she watches her world collapse in real time. Linda's expression doesn't change, but her voice drops even colder. "I'm not destroying lives because of a divorce, Mrs. Lancaster. I'm responding to the fact that you forced my son to sign legal documents while holding his crying child, mocking his pain. I'm responding to you calling my son pathetic while he sobbed. I'm responding to you celebrating the humiliation of a man whose only crime was loving your daughter. And most egregiously, I'm responding to your threat to take my grandchildren away from their father." The word grandchildren hits Sarah like a physical blow. She stumbles backward, her hand instinctively going to her pregnant belly. "The baby," she says, her voice hollow. "Michael, I'm carrying your daughter. And you're really Linda Chen's son, which means my baby is the Chen heir." Michael sees the calculation in her eyes, sees her doing the math on what she's just signed away. Not just a husband but a dynasty. Not just a marriage, but generational wealth that would have made her children untouchable. Your baby, Michael says, his voice steady now despite the tears still wet on his face, will carry the Chin name, not Lancaster. Your daughter will grow up knowing her grandmother loves her unconditionally, but her mother threw away her father before she was even born because she was too busy with her fiancé to value what she had. Your daughter will have everything, Sarah. Everything except you in her father's life. The words destroy her. Michael can see it, can see Sarah Lancaster finally understanding what her greed and her mother's poison and Marcus's manipulation have cost her. Marcus shifts uncomfortably, clearly realizing the woman he thought was his ticket to a comfortable life just became unemployed, disgraced, and carrying a child whose father controls nearly $1 billion. Michael, wait, Sarah starts forward, but Linda's security specialist moves to block her path, his presence professional but unmistakably protective. Michael, please. We can fix this. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. The baby needs her father. Danny needs his father. We're a family. But Michael is already moving toward the door, his mother's hand on his shoulder, guiding him toward the car waiting outside. Danny stirs in his arms, mumbling softly, and Michael adjusts his hold, keeping his son secure and safe. The baby needs a father who her mother values, Michael says without turning around. Danny needs a father who his mother respects. You threw us away, Sarah. You signed the papers. You chose Marcus and your mother's approval and the Lancaster name over your family. Those were your choices. Now you live with them. He walks out into the cold January night, the sounds of distant fireworks still echoing across the city. The luxury SUV waiting at the curb has a car seat already installed, and Michael carefully buckles Danny in, his son barely waking as he's secured safely. Linda slides in beside them, and Jennifer closes the door with a solid thunk that sounds like finality, like the closing of a chapter Michael needed to end months ago. Through the tinted window, Michael watches the Lancaster family stand in the lobby, their New Year's celebration forgotten. Victoria has her hand over her mouth, finally understanding what her cruelty caused. Robert is on his phone, probably calling lawyers trying to figure out how to salvage their firm. And Sarah just stands there, her hand on her pregnant belly, watching the SUV like she's watching her future drive away because she is. The vehicle pulls away smoothly, leaving the Lancaster building behind. Michael leans his head back against the seat, exhausted, but feeling safe for the first time in 3 years. Danny sleeps beside him, his small chest rising and falling peacefully, unaware of everything that just changed. What happens to them now? Michael asks quietly, not because he wants revenge, but because he needs to understand what comes next, what his phone call triggered, what his mother's love looks like when channeled through business and power. Linda's hand covers his, her thumb brushing over his knuckles in the same comforting gesture she's used since he was small. They lose everything they didn't earn, she says simply. The gallery position, the board seats, the social standing built on donations from our foundation. They lose the reputation they valued more than they valued you. And they wake up every morning for the rest of their lives knowing they threw away the Chin heir because they were too blind to see past their own greed. She pauses, then adds more softly, but that's not your burden to carry, Michael. Your job now is to heal, to care for Danny, to prepare for your daughter, to remember that their blindness doesn't define your worth. Michael closes his eyes, feeling the exhaustion in every bone, feeling Danny's small hand in his, feeling the weight of the last 3 years lifting like fog in morning sun. The SUV glides through city streets toward the Chin estate, toward home, toward the life Michael walked away from and is finally ready to reclaim. Behind them, the Lancaster family faces a New Year's morning that will arrive with termination notices and withdrawal letters and the complete destruction of everything they thought they had. But Michael doesn't look back anymore. He's done looking back. He's looking at Danny sleeping peacefully, looking forward to meeting his daughter, looking toward the family that never stopped loving him, even when he pushed them away. The divorce papers are signed. The marriage is over. But Michael Chin is just beginning. And the people who tried to destroy him are about to spend the rest of their lives wishing they'd treated him with basic dignity. 6 months pass like pages turning in a book Michael thought was finished but is actually just beginning a new chapter. He stands in the nursery of the Chin estate, sunlight streaming through windows that overlook gardens where Danny now runs and plays daily, his hand resting on the crib where 2-week-old Sophie Chin sleeps peacefully. The room is painted soft lavender, filled with toys and books and every comfort money can provide, but more importantly, filled with love from a grandmother who spent the first hour of her granddaughter's life crying tears of joy while holding her tiny hand. Michael hears the sound he's been waiting for, his mother's footsteps in the hallway steady and sure. Linda appears in the doorway holding a folder, her face carefully neutral in the way that means she has news Michael needs to hear but won't like. "The final reports," she says quietly, moving to stand beside him at the crib, both of them watching Sophie sleep with her small fists curled against her chest like she's already fighting the world. Michael doesn't ask her to summarize. He already knows most of it from Jennifer's weekly updates, but hearing it all together hits differently. The Lancaster family lost everything. The gallery closed completely, unable to survive without Chin Investments backing. Victoria's charity board seat disappeared along with her social standing when people realized the Chin Family Trust had been her only claim to importance. Robert's financial advisory firm declared bankruptcy, taking his professional reputation with it. All of them now living in a modest suburban house that Robert's brother owns, dependent on family charity and whatever freelance work they can find. Sarah's engagement to Marcus lasted exactly 3 weeks after Michael left. Marcus disappeared the moment he realized Sarah was unemployed, pregnant, and connected to a family that had just lost everything. She's raising Danny alone now, living with her parents, working as a retail manager at a department store, barely making ends meet. "She's been calling," Linda says carefully, and Michael's hand tightens on the crib rail. "Every day for 6 months. She leaves messages. She sends letters. She's begging to see Sophie, to apologize, to explain. She wants to discuss custody arrangements." Linda pauses, her voice heavy with the weight of a mother who wants to protect her son from more pain but knows some decisions aren't hers to make. "The legal team says we can block her completely. Given the circumstances of the divorce, her abandonment, her documented cruelty, you could terminate her parental rights to Sophie. She'd never have to be part of your life again." Michael looks down at his sleeping daughter, at the tiny person who has her mother's delicate features and Michael's dark eyes, who will grow up with every advantage but also every complication of being a Chin. He thinks about Sarah standing in that lobby watching everything she'd destroyed drive away. Thinks about the messages Jennifer plays for him sometimes, where Sarah's voice breaks with genuine regret. He thinks about Danny, who cries for his mommy some nights, who doesn't understand why he can't see her more than the supervised visits the court ordered. "No," Michael says finally, his voice steady. "Sophie deserves the truth when she's old enough to understand it. She deserves to know her mother made terrible choices, but that I chose not to perpetuate pain. And Danny deserves more time with his mother, supervised at first, but more than what we're allowing now." He touches Sophie's sleeping face, marveling at skin so soft it seems impossible. "They'll both know their grandmother walked through fire for us. They'll know their father survived heartbreak and came out stronger. And they'll know that revenge isn't healing, it's just another kind of pain." Linda's eyes shine with tears she doesn't hide. "You're a better person than I am," she says, pulling Michael into a gentle hug. "I'd make sure Sarah Lancaster never had another peaceful night's sleep." Michael laughs softly against his mother's shoulder, the sound lighter than it's been in years. "You already did that, Mom. You just left her alive to learn from it. And maybe, eventually, to be a better mother to our children than she was a wife to me." They stand together in the nursery, 3 generations of Chens in one room, Danny having just run in, chattering about the butterfly he saw in the garden. The past acknowledged, the future sleeping peacefully in lavender sunlight. Michael thinks about the man who signed divorce papers while crying at a New Year's party, holding his son while his world collapsed. That man thought his life was ending. That man thought he'd lost everything. But that man didn't know yet that sometimes you have to lose everything false to find everything true. Sometimes you have to sign away the wrong future to make room for the right one. Sophie stirs in her crib, her eyes opening slowly, and when she sees Michael, she makes a small cooing sound that melts his heart completely. Michael lifts his daughter carefully, breathing in that new baby smell, feeling tiny fingers grip his own. "Hello, my love," Michael whispers. "Welcome to your beautiful life." Danny climbs onto the chair beside him, wanting to see his sister, and Michael adjusts to make room for both his children, his heart so full it aches. Outside, summer sun warms the Chen estate gardens, making everything bright and alive and full of possibility. And somewhere across town, Sarah Lancaster probably looks at the same sun and thinks about the family she destroyed, about the daughter growing up without her daily presence, about the moment she signed away the most valuable thing she'd ever have. But that's her story to carry now, her lesson to learn. Michael's story is different. Michael's story is about a man who survived betrayal, reclaimed his power, and chose to build something beautiful from the ashes of what tried to destroy him. That's the story Sophie and Danny will inherit. Not one of revenge, but one of resilience. Not one of bitterness, but one of strength tempered with compassion. And when they're old enough to understand, Michael will tell them that sometimes the people who try to break you accidentally set you free instead. And that freedom, that fierce and hard-won freedom, is worth everything it cost. The divorce papers were signed at a New Year's party while fireworks exploded over the city, marking endings and beginnings. And Michael Chin, standing in his daughter's nursery with both his children in his arms and his mother beside him, understands now that sometimes the cruelest endings create space for the most beautiful beginnings. He is exactly where he's meant to be. And the people who tried to destroy him gave him the greatest gift imaginable. They set him free to find his way home. Where are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories of strength, redemption, and the kind of justice that reminds us that dignity can never be taken, only given away. More powerful stories coming soon.